Hi, it's Alison here. I've just made a little video just to help explain the terms of your will. So starting with sort of the overall structure, you'll see that the will is divided into sections. We'll go over some of those sections a little bit more detail soon. I'm going to explain what the gift over provision means, because you might see that in your will. And I'll also explain the main gift sections and the catastrophe clause, we call it, and then also go over the main executor powers, interpretations and definitions. So starting with the first page of your will, you'll see this intentions section, which is part A. This is where we revoke all previous wills, declare that this is your last will. We need to do this to make it legally binding. And sometimes if you have assets overseas, we'll include a part here about that, or if you have a different name that you go by, that might also be listed in this section here under part A. Also, if the will is made in contemplation of your marriage to somebody, that may also be included here in part A if it's relevant. Moving along to part B, this is where you make all of your testamentary directions. So this is essentially the main part of your will. The first thing you'll see is that we have appointed your executor. The full name of your executor will be here, as will your backup people. They'll be listed. Sometimes there might be a clause where you're leaving a gift to your executor for doing the job of executor, and that will be there in 2.2. If you have children and you're appointing someone to be their guardian, we'll also have that here in the next part. And then we will talk about what happens to your personal belongings. So you'll see that clause as well. And then notice here how talks about the gift over provision. So I'm just going to explain that. This is a term that is defined. So you will see a definitions section at the back of the will, and this is where I've taken this gift over provision definition from. So really it's a shorthand way of adding in this whole paragraph so that your will's just a bit easier to read. So you might see that there's a gift made to a person and it'll say with the gift over provision applying, or it might say with the gift over provision not applying. If the gift over provision applies, what that means is that if the original recipient of the gift has died before you, then if they have children, their children will inherit that gift instead. And if there's more than one of them, they'll share it. So, for example, if you left a gift to your child, but they passed away before you and they'd had children, so you had grandkids, then your grandkids would inherit that gift instead of your children. If the gift over provision doesn't apply, what would happen is that gift would fail and it would get added in to the rest of the gifts in the will. So moving along, you can see here that, that's that personal belongings and specific gifts. So if you've left anything like a sum of money or your jewellery or something, it'll be listed under specific gifts. And then everything that's left over is your residual estate. So once all the specific gifts are made, once all the money's paid out that you need to pay, for example, to get your probate application, all the expenses of having your estate, once all your debts are paid, everything that's left over is called your residual estate. And so we generally will make gifts to divide up your residual estate. And you'll see here, it'll say whether the gift over provision applies or not. And then sometimes we'll also include this catch all, so that if any of these gifts have failed, this is what 5.2 says, if any of the gifts fail, then it gets added back in to be shared amongst whoever's left. Then the next section is this part C in relation to your superannuation death benefits. So what we're aiming to do here is to make sure that any binding nominations that you've made are followed, because sometimes they may have lapsed or they may not have been valid. This is really a wish, because your super doesn't necessarily form part of your estate. We would have discussed that during the meeting, but we put this in here as a sort of catch to try to get those situations where there may have been denomination made, but it's lapsed. We're saying to your executor, please make gifts that would essentially follow that binding nomination. Then the next part here is your directions for your executor. So this is all of the executor's powers. And sometimes we'll say it's like the hamburger with the lot. So we put in a lot of powers here that probably will never be needed. But you're much better off having a power that you don't need in the will rather than wishing you had a power because you can't add it in later. So it's just better to have a really detailed powers clause, which is part D. Part E is the interpretation. That says F there, but sometimes, you know, if you have additional parts, the numbering might be off, but it'll usually be part E. Interpretation is just saying, you know, if there's a dispute, you know, it's the law of Victoria is what the way that we interpret it, and so on. Part F is your definitions section. So this is where you will find the definitions for things like the gift over provision or children. Anything that is capitalised in the will be at the back in the definitions section. Children's an important one to understand because if you have stepchildren, for example, they're not covered by this clause. So it might be something that we need to think about in certain circumstances. Okay, so that's really it. The most important thing is that you understand parts A and B. If you've got any questions, feel free to get in touch. It's designed for you to watch this video, but also make sure you read that letter that I've sent you quite carefully because there's a lot of really good information in there. Sometimes we might be needing further instructions from you. So in any of your documents, so in your will or your powers of attorney, if it's highlighted in yellow, we need your further instructions. So please provide that as soon as you can. Otherwise, please review the documents, check that they say what you want them to say, check all the names are spelt correctly. We can make any changes that we need to. And then if you do have any questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch. Thanks.